Hello everyone, I have some new books for you today. This time it is 3 biographies for Pride Month. So I read Dr. Mom Chung of the Fair-Haired Bastards, The Life of a Wartime Celebrity by Judy Tsu-Chun Wu. I also read The Mayor of Castro Street by Randy Schiltz. And finally, I read Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson by Tourmaline. This is going along with the task I have set for myself to read 3 biographies for every Heritage Month that we typically celebrate in the US. So I was really excited to be able to learn about some influential figures in the LGBT community. The first book that I read was Dr. Mom Chung of the Fair-Haired Bastards. I was attracted to this one because of the unique title, as well as the prospect of being able to learn about a queer woman of color at a time when LGBT people were fairly invisible. This one is so interesting. It's so fascinating to me that there's enough information about this little known person that there's able to be this long of a book about her. Margaret Chung was a Chinese American woman born in California who was the first American-born Chinese American woman to get a medical degree. She was a practicing doctor for a very long time. Eventually, she got into celebrity circles and became a bit of a physician to the stars. Because from what it sounds like, the way that quotes from people who knew her sound, that everyone was just obsessed with her. It sounds like she was just this extremely charismatic, fascinating, lovely person that everyone loved to be around. And so she was very popular, but mostly in the straight white community, because it talks a lot about how she kind of straddled the line between different worlds: the Chinese American world, the white American world, the queer world, the straight world, the female world, and the male world. And as a woman and a professional, she found more acceptance in white male circles. It goes a lot into kind of the different prejudices and influences that made it that way. But what she ended up being the most known for, and why she's called Dr. Mom Chung, is because during World War II, she would host these elaborate dinners for young straight white soldiers, straight white male soldiers, and she would adopt them as her sons in these like little ceremonies. And she had hundreds, maybe thousands, hundreds at least of them. Also some daughters, but mostly sons, because that's who was mostly in the war effort. All of these young men just adored her and called her Mom Chung. This network of people extended so far. There were so many people who knew her at this time. Amelia Earhart was one of her adopted daughters. She knew Anna May Wong, who I talked about in my last month's video of biographies that I read for Asian American Native Hawaiian Heritage Month. She knew tons of, obviously, military personnel, different officers from low ranking to high ranking, and also, because of all of those connections, eventually had some political influence as well, because those people fed into politics and the government. Just this person kind of lost to history who, like, I've never heard of. Have you ever heard of this person? But I got to learn all about in this book. And also, it's interesting to see kind of how the author pieces together Margaret Chung's life as a queer woman, because there are at least 2 women that the author is pretty certain she was romantically involved with. But we only have comments that the first one recorded claiming that she had all these experiences and this kind of relationship with Margaret. And then the second one had a bunch of letters that Margaret had written to her that sound very much like love letters. So it's really fascinating to get that insight into being queer during that time period, and also kind of the puzzle of piecing together what those experiences and lives were like, since we don't have direct comments from the woman herself. So it's also really fascinating to see how she navigated all of the different spheres of her life. The author talks a lot about how she kind of had different personas that she adopted for different groups of people that she interacted with, and that she changed her persona throughout her life in order to best benefit from them, whether she wanted to be more of a butch, powerful looking person, authoritative professional person as a doctor, a motherly, nurturing person for these young soldiers. She was able to slide in and out of these roles accordingly to whatever benefited her the most. It really thoroughly explored all of the different facets of her identity, whether that was as a Chinese American person, as a woman, as an unmarried person, that had a big impact over what she was able to do. There were a lot of circles that she wasn't able to navigate because she was unmarried. As a closeted person in the LGBT community, as a semi-celebrity, as a mother figure, it really thoroughly examines all of those different aspects of her life. However, I gave this book 3 stars because it was so dry. It was written by Judy Tsu-Chun Wu, who is an associate professor in the Department of History at Ohio State University, which makes a lot of sense because this is so academic, such dense, scholarly writing. It reads like a scholarly article in an academic journal. It is not fun to read, like it's not entertaining. There really isn't much personality or distinction to the voice. It's just very clear-cut, straightforward, and then very repetitive at times. I really recognized the analytic academic language used to drive home certain arguments that the author was trying to make, but she's making the same argument a lot of the time. And so she kind of repeats that argument over and over again, when I think if she had just introduced the argument, and like I think the main argument was about Margaret Chung created different personas in order to navigate different aspects of society, and kind of had to balance like the different aspects of her identity through doing so. Like that's kind of the gist of like the argument that she was making. And I think she could have really introduced that at the beginning and then just told us all of her evidence about these aspects of Margaret Chung's life and just let me, the reader, come to my own conclusions about how those events in Margaret Chung's life relate to the argument. It just got really tough to read near the end, which is unfortunate. So while I wouldn't necessarily order you to go pick this up, I would recommend that you go read an article about Dr. Mom Chung because she was so fascinating. Because she was able to just charm so many people and slip into their lives. Like at one point she mentions that it's unclear how she got the money to put on so many huge dinners for hundreds of people every week during World War II when everything was rationed. And then like how she was just able to easily work her way into the lives of so many celebrities. It just sounds like everyone loved her. There was just something about her as a person. And that is so interesting to me. I loved being able to peek into this time period once again. It felt very familiar to me going into early 20th century old Hollywood / California, because sometimes she was in Los Angeles, most of the time she was in San Francisco, and to kind of carry that over from my reading of Daughter of the Dragon, The Life of Anna May Wong last month. So that was interesting for me. I highly recommend that you learn more about Dr. Mom Chung, her life, and her influence. The next book that I read is The Mayor of Castro Street, The Life and Times of Harvey Milk by Randy Shilts. And just to start this out, I would also like to point out that Randy Shilts, the author of this book, is also significant. So this book was first published in 1982, and it says that Randy Shilts was one of the first openly gay journalists hired at a major newspaper and worked for the San Francisco Chronicle for 13 years. He died of AIDS in 1994 at his home in the Sonoma County Redwoods in California. It felt like a real privilege to be able to learn about the amazing life of Harvey Milk from the voice of another pioneer who was openly gay as a journalist during this time as well. This book is dense and long. 348 pages of thick, dense text, and I was fascinated through all of it. It painted such a vivid, exciting picture of Harvey Milk as a very eccentric, fascinating individual with kind of messy relationships, but who put his everything into what he cared about and the people that he cared about. So I really feel like I got to know Harvey Milk as a person, while also really got to know how local politics and government function, which is so awesome that it was able to make that kind of bureaucratic drudgery so interesting to me, especially for so long. It kept my attention for so long. There's also some excellent pictures in here that I really loved, and I really feel like the writing was able to help me keep track of so many events for so many years and so many people who were in Harvey Milk's life and who were also in politics at the time, influencing all of the events. I was able to keep it all really straight. Like the narrative is so well done. There's so much going on and it's so well organized, so interesting. And what really struck me the most at the end here is that this was published in 1982 and Harvey Milk was killed in 1976, 1977. This book was published only a few years after the assassination of Harvey Milk. It doesn't give any long-term impact of his influence on the gay rights movement or his influence into politics and government. since it kind of just gives hard facts of things that happen and then leaves it off where it was published, when I went and looked up openly gay politicians and just like read Wikipedia article after Wikipedia article of significant LGBT politicians since the murder of Harvey Milk, it filled me with so much hope that there was going to be so much progress and evolution that Harvey Milk and the author of this book couldn't even dream of. And so that gives me a lot of hope for all the progress and evolution in the future that we can't even dream of. You know, I loved getting that on the ground in the moment perspective from this author. As I said, it is very long. Very long. I do suspect that people not quite as ragingly nerdy as me will have their attention held by the in-depth description of political campaigns and local government. Even though I loved it, I gave this 5 stars. I had so much fun reading it and it had a big impact on me. I would recommend this just to someone who that actually appeals to. If you love history, if you love learning about activism and social movements, and if you are okay with over 300 pages of dense text about historical events, then this is for you. But I can see how that wouldn't be for everyone. However, once again, I feel like I know Harvey Milk. He was such a character. Such a character. I also really loved how it talked a lot about his hatred of moderates. Moderate gay politicians who were just trying to play the game and appease straight liberals and follow the rules, and that Harvey Milk didn't want to play by the rules. He wanted to go, he wanted to fight, he wanted to get the ball rolling, he wanted to get right in there, start running for political offices even with no political experience. He just wanted to do things his own way and to gather and galvanize people on his own, which a lot of the establishment gay activists hated about him, but that he was able to bring the community together and create so much change and so much goodness, foster so much connection just by going for it. And I think that that is so inspiring, that you don't have to wait for your turn. You don't necessarily have to submit to social rules and conventions. If there's something that you're passionate about and you think that you can do something about it, then you should go out and do it. I think that's, to me, the biggest, most powerful message of Harvey Milk's life. When he saw an issue, he went out and was determined to fix it. Whether that was issues between the police and the gay community in San Francisco, or if it was something completely unrelated to LGBT rights once he was finally an elected official. When he saw that it was an issue in the community, that people never picked up dog poop and that that was causing issues in the neighborhood, then he went out there and campaigned for a city ordinance requiring people to pick up dog poop. Like, he just went out and he did it. That makes me want to be more like that and to just go out there and do something about the things that I care about. So I love this. Not for everyone, because I'm a massive history nerd, but if you're a massive history nerd, I think you're gonna like this one. I do know a lot of people who are big politics, history, activism dorks, so this is for you. Finally, I had the pleasure and the privilege to read Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson by Tourmaline. I was so determined to include a biography of Marsha P. Johnson in my Pride Month biography reads that I found out that this wasn't going to be published until the end of May, and so I pre-ordered it and it was shipped to my house on the day that it was published. I needed to guarantee that I would have a copy, and so I was like, I'm not going to risk hoping that the library has a copy. I'm just going to get it so that I have it immediately when Pride Month begins. And I'm so happy that I did. Look at this. First of all, I'm already going to tell you right off the bat that I recommend this book. I think that you should read it. If you're watching this video, if you're watching a video about Pride Month books, then you should read this book. I just think I would universally recommend that. But I'm so happy that I own it, and it's a new release by a trans author. And so why not just buy it, okay? Why not buy it and support a trans author during Pride Month? Come on. But look, now I own this beautiful hardcover volume that is so colorful and gorgeous, and Marsha P. Johnson is so beautiful, and I get to have her smiling face on this book. This is the kind of book that I would display on a shelf, like facing out like this. It's just so gorgeous. But even if it was sitting on a shelf, it has this beautiful spine. It's just beautiful. So I'm very excited that I get to own this. I get to lend it to people. I get to recommend it to people. It also has some fabulous color photos. I don't know if I'm going to be able to really do justice to these photos. My favorite photo in here is this photo of Marsha P. Johnson during Pride of 1982, where she's wearing this fabulous wig on. She's wearing all of these incredible sparkly jewels, and she's wearing a black sequined jumpsuit. Look at this right here at the bottom. Do you see this? Can you see this? I don't know if this is showing up on camera, but like, just amazing. I keep thinking about this photo just throughout the day, thinking, can I do that? Can I get a black sequin jumpsuit? What an icon. And her fashion was such a huge part of her artistry and her life. It's just so incredible. Anyway, let me tell you about this book. So it's the first biography of Marsha P. Johnson, which is so exciting. How have we not had one before now? That's crazy. And it really covers every aspect of her life, which I love. I love a thorough, cohesive picture of a person. I kind of consider myself a bit of an expert on biographies at this point, now that I've read, 12 biographies this year. This was interesting. It's interesting to see how different biographies are organized. Most of them are chronological. This one was mostly chronological because the sections are the different roles in Marsha's life. Her role as a child in a family in New Jersey, her role as a street queen in New York City, her role as a Stonewall rider, and it talks about the conditions around those different roles that she had in her life. And so that's roughly chronological, but sometimes there's some overlap with different things. What stood out to me the most about this biography was the tone, because these two books, the Dr. Mom Chung one is clearly a very scholarly, dry tone, and then the Mayor Castro Street, I did think that the tone of the Mayor Castro Street could be quite funny, quite wry. I tend to really like the writing style of journalists, but it was still quite serious most of the time. The tone of Marsha, the biography of Marsha P. Johnson, is so light and joyful, and the language used to talk about the events in Marsha's life is beautiful, often quite poetic, very empowering. It really drives home the impact of her life and her actions throughout the entire book, even though the concluding chapter is all about her legacy and the impact that she has had on the LGBT community, on our culture. Just throughout the entire book, it feels so positive, which is in line with who Marsha P. Johnson was as a person, because she was a bright, shining, joyful person who had such a profound impact on people, just trying to make them happy and to take care of them. And so I thought it was so well done that the tone matched the subject so well. I thought that was very successful. And it also made it so easy to read. I just cruised through this book because it was so bright and fun to read about this colorful person. And what I thought was so incredible was that there's so much information here about so much more in Marsha P. Johnson's life than just the Stonewall riots. The Stonewall Uprising. So I learned a lot about the activism that Marsha really spearheaded on the streets of New York, the way that she was constantly fighting for gay rights, whether she was in protests, in marches, in gay pride parades, at events, any of these things, but that also she was doing on the ground, direct-to-person assistance. She was helping food and clothes, queer people in need. She was advocating for trans people at every opportunity that she had. This talks a bit about the prejudice that even the LGBT community had against trans people at that time, which I know is still an ongoing issue to be aware of, and that she openly fought against that she fought for herself, but that she also fought for others so much. It talked about who she was as a performer, and as an artist. She created amazing, beautiful banners. She was really passionate about art, sewing, fashion, wardrobe, but that she was also involved in multiple queer theater companies. I was a little confused about the way that it described the theatrical performances that she was a part of, because it would talk about how she would go off script all the time and would just improv stuff and just start vamping, and that everyone loved it. And I was like, that sounds like a mess. Like, I don't know how that would work. That sounds like she's ruining the performance. But it just kept saying that like the audience loved her, that she would just steal the show every time. And so it really sounds like there's some overlap between Marsha P. Johnson and Dr. Mom Chung, that they just had this it factor that drew people to them, that they were just magnetic. There was just something about being around them that really had a huge impact on people. And so I thought it was so interesting to kind of see that connection between these two people. They also talked about Marsha's experiences during the AIDS crisis of the 1980s, and that she was a caretaker of so many of her friends who were dying of AIDS, and that she sacrificed so much to take care of people, to make sure that they got the care that they needed. And it talked a lot about the lack of care that was available to people with AIDS in the 80s and the lack of action that the government took to address the AIDS crisis, which even in such a heavy chapter, it still talked a lot about how bright and caring that she was as a person. And then it talked about her death under unclear circumstances that was ruled a suicide, but kind of unclear what happened to her because the police refused to investigate it in 1992. The funeral that was held for her, that was this joyful celebration of her life, which is kind of a connection with Harvey Milk, because Harvey Milk's funeral was this noisy, joyful affair, just celebrating who he was as a person, because he loved fun, he loved a party. All three of these people in a room together, oh my gosh, the room would catch on fire, I think. And so both of these people had loud, noisy, joyful funerals, and Harvey P. Milk, Harvey Pay It No Mind Milk, Harvey Milk, his ashes were mixed with purple Kool-Aid and powdered bubble bath before it was thrown into the ocean, so that when it hit the water, it would turn into lavender bubbles. What a way to go. And so she had this joyful funeral where people talked about the huge impact that she had. Then it talked about her legacy and the influence that she's had on queer communities today. But that also just in pop culture, she was an inspiration to Andy Warhol, and I think it said Sammy Davis, I want to say. She continues to be referenced by queer activists and artists, which is just so exciting to have such a happy, beautiful, artistic person continue to be such an enduring symbol and inspiration today. I will say I had a couple of issues with this book, so I rated this one 4 stars instead of 5 stars. I feel like most of the issues that I have with this book are editing things and not writing things, because I really did love the writing in this book. But there were some parts, especially in the beginning, but then also it came up at the end a little bit too, where it would describe the exact same event more than once, and often in almost word for word, just a few pages away from each other, which was very disorienting. Even though it kind of made sense that it was referencing the same event in 2 different places, it was odd that the second time it described it, it would describe it the exact same way as if it had never been mentioned before, which was confusing. The other thing that bothered me was that there were just some things that just seemed unclear. I'm like, at the beginning of the book, it said that joggers found Marsha's body in the river. At the end of the book, it says that some of her friends found her. That was kind of unclear. And then something that really confused me throughout was that the book has a few different places where it talks about the importance of disability activism, combating ableism, and celebrating Marsha P. Johnson's neurodiversity. And I love learning about neurodivergent people. I have many close friends who are neurodivergent, and I think that neurodivergent people have made massive world-changing contributions to society. So I love learning about what people are experiencing and how that impacts their lives. But the way that it described her neurodiversity was very unclear. So it started out by saying that some people claim that Marsha P. Johnson was not at Stonewall until later, that she was not there when the uprising broke out, when the police first got there, because there are instances when she says that, when she says, oh, I only showed up later with this thing, but that she has a lot of contradicting statements saying that she was there in the back when it started, oh, she came later, all these things, and that when she's interviewed about it, she says different things pretty much every time. And so it talks about how her memory seems to be a bit different than other people's, that she remembers things differently. She might have a different perception of time. She might have more emotion-based memories than time-based memories. She talked a lot about how she had trouble focusing and had times when she would talk about her mind being overwhelmed. And so I thought that's what she was experiencing, what was going on with Marsha. But then later, it talked about her having breakdowns, but it just kind of mentioned it offhandedly and didn't describe them at all. And so I was like, oh, well, the people I know who have had like mental breakdowns, who have breakdowns in some way, like usually it has something to do with depression or anxiety, and it might be some kind of, like sometimes I feel like breakdown is used to describe a panic attack. And then it wasn't until much, much later that it described the breakdowns that she was having, like she was screaming in the street and got arrested, or she like trashed a friend's house, which I am not here to judge that. If you are having mental health issues, that contributes to you doing these things. I have all sympathy for that. I'm not going to criticize that. But I just thought it was odd that that was kind of dropped casually and not thoroughly explained. And then later, at the very end of the book, when it's talking about her death and what may have contributed to her death, whether it was suicide or an accident or murder, those all were kind of presented as possibilities, was that she wasn't thinking clearly because she had neurosyphilis, which is when you have syphilis that progresses to the point where it affects your mental state. And I was like, okay, if she had neurosyphilis, like how long did she have neurosyphilis? How long was that impacting her? That was the first time that I had mentioned her having syphilis or neurosyphilis. That sounds horrible. That sounds so distressing that she was going through that. But I didn't mention it until the very end, and so that made me really wonder how that was impacting other things that she was going through throughout her life, for how long, but it didn't explain that. And so I really wish it would have explained her mental health and the things that she was experiencing in a more cohesive way, because the way that it was presented was very confusing, and it seems like it was a major part of her life that really impacted how she experienced things and how she interacted with other people. However, I've warned you about that ahead of time, so now you know that that's coming. So instead of being confused like me, you can go into it knowing what you're in for, and you can go out and you can buy this book because it's Pride Month. Why wouldn't you buy this book? Why wouldn't you display it lovingly on your shelf? Because then you can be inspired by Marsha P. Johnson and think about all the ways that you can incorporate art and activism into your life, and to be a cheerful, happy person even throughout so much adversity and hardship. Because that's really what it emphasized over and over again in this book, was that Marsha lifted people up, that she was a light to other people, even with all the challenges that she was experiencing. I think that is a universal lesson within Pride Month, outside of Pride Month, all year round. So I am so happy that I was able to learn about and from these three individuals. Please comment down below what you read for Pride Month or will read before the end of Pride Month, or anything else that you're reading. Just something that you read during Pride Month, even if it has nothing to do with Pride. That's okay too, I guess. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.